All right, sorry for the delay, guys. System, lots of tweaks. But anyway, welcome to our Lunch and Learn. I'm Dee Ancestor with Cook County Emergency Management. Some familiar faces, so thanks for coming back. This is our November version of our Lunch and Learn series. We've had one every month this year so far, except for January. We have one more month to go for sure, and December is out there for debate if we'll have one with the holidays. It's a little hard to get people here. Hopefully they're enjoying family. Our sessions are scheduled for an hour, give or take here today, but offering about 40 minutes of presentation from our speakers today, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So a little bit of flex in there, but we'll hope to get you out of here by 12:30. This session is being recorded. No one's on the other side of Zoom right now, but it is being recorded, and it will be available on our website within a few days for people to watch it on demand when they have time. So I just want to let you know that. And in addition, our speakers up here are very, very sensitive. So sidebar conversations are able to be captured. Even this is captured. So just so you're aware. Housekeeping, if you've not.
In the beginning.
It's good to know, right?
Told us that in the beginning.
We'll edit all that out.
Please edit it.
If you've not been here before, restrooms down the hall to the left, or you can go through C14 through the other door and I'll take you right there. I don't expect any weather issues that we need to evacuate for or take shelter for. Okay, all right.
So I know it's here.
Right. But if there is some sort of an emergency, just find myself, Patty or Dutch, and we'll take you to the rally point. We are looking for your suggestions for topics for next year. So the evaluation that I'd like for you to fill out at the end, if you have any suggestions for additional topics for 23, please let us know. With that, I am just going to introduce our speakers real quick, just by name, and then you guys can talk about your creds. Okay. So today we're talking with the National Weather Service titled Riding the Storm Out. They have a lot of really amazing technology and really, really smart people in their office that help to keep us safe when weather is pending or is bad. So Alan, you're kicking it off. Okay. Alan Curtis and Brooke Hagenhoff and Chad Hahn. So take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, thank you for being here this morning. It's a pretty broad presentation talk because I know we have some familiarity with some of the people in the room here. So some people may not know us very well, some may know us well. So hopefully everyone gets something out of it. And actually, a big overarching part of this is going to be just the partnerships that we hope to, one, create, continue to grow, things of that nature. And those partnerships is actually a big reason why we're even here today. I think was it about a month ago, that tabletop exercise?
Yeah,
right?
a little longer.
Okay, maybe a little over a month ago, I was at a tabletop exercise in Altoona with Polk County and a bunch of others. And this presentation came about because I was talking to Altoona Fire Department about their capabilities and our capabilities. And we were learning, honestly, some interesting things about what they could do, what I could do, or what we could do, and how we can work together more. So that spurred a conversation with Polk County here, and voila, we're here. So we're very grateful, obviously, to have a lot of those relationships. Again, like I said, some of you are probably already familiar with us in general, but those that aren't, you may not be aware, we're under the executive branch, and maybe more oddly, we're under the Department of Commerce. And that'll make more sense in a second. But our parent agency then below that is National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and then the Weather Service. And at the bottom there, it's always kind of fun to say that per person, so not every taxpayer, but per person in the United States, we cost clearly less than a cup of Starbucks coffee. So we think it's a really good value, and hopefully you guys do as well. But with that, again, a little bit more of kind of like maybe the boring side of things here, but our mission, and this is a big reason why I think we're under the Department of Commerce ultimately, is not only is it life and property, trying to protect that, but it's the enhancement of the economy. So you can imagine a lot of industries rely heavily on weather prediction, forecasting, recovery, things of that nature. So there are actually a number of studies out there that talk about the value of weather, which is really, really hard to quantify, or weather forecasts, that is. But many of them return values on the order easily in the millions, if not billions of dollars, and depending on the event or the circumstance. But then for us within the Weather Service, we also have a broad vision, maybe a little cheesy, weather ready nation is kind of the tagline for it. But generally speaking, what that's trying to do is bring together what we do and sharing it with not only our partners that we work with directly, but obviously the public and society at large. Because again, weather is great and all, but a lot of times we don't even think about it sometimes until it occurs. So the challenge oftentimes is making sure people are ready ahead of time. So that's kind of the core of the vision. A little bit more detail in the government, we love arbitrary boundaries and we are no exception to that. So you'll see a bunch of offices across the United States there. There's 122 of the forecast offices, and then we have a bunch of other units that do specializations. River centers do like river forecasting, help us with river flooding and things of that nature. We also have other specialty centers here in this part of the country, probably familiar with the Storm Prediction Center, SPC for short. Aviation side, the Aviation Weather Center, Climate Prediction Center, and there's more than a dozen of these types of centers that we work with as we get to larger scales. Actually, I'll go back real quick. One interesting thing of note, the Weather Service, not by the current name, but in general, has been around since 1870. And even before that, at least in this country's history, weather has played a large role. Lewis and Clark took numerous observations as they were exploring the United States. And fun fact, at least to me, is they, at least currently, as anyone knows, potentially documented the first tornado in US history, documentation. They didn't see it, but if you go back through their logs, they describe damage that in the way the trees were laying in the aftermath of a storm that strongly infers that they observed the aftermath of a tornado. So that's kind of one interesting thing from my perspective. But we started off as a signal service in 1870, then we moved to the Weather Bureau not too long after that, and then National Weather Service. So we've had three names, and we've been under things like the military, I believe, was the initial one, Department of Agriculture for a large chunk of our history, and again, more recently, the Department of Commerce. Again, the arbitrary boundaries, again, I know a lot of this is for Polk County centric people, but in case you're working larger across the state, there are 5 offices that cover portions of this state. Sioux Falls, South Dakota to the northwest, Omaha kind of to the southwest, La Crosse, Wisconsin across the northeast, and then the Quad Cities for a lot of the east and southeast. So physically there's 2 offices within this state, but there's 5 that have jurisdiction. And I will note though, for anyone that may be working with counties along the fringes or the edges there, they look like hard boundaries, but in many ways they aren't. So we work with the offices and vice versa to make things as easy as possible. Just something to keep in mind with that. And again, more specifically, we are up by Saylorville Lake, about halfway up on the west side, Beaver Drive, if you're familiar. Don't be strangers. We're happy to have visitors come out, see what we do, share what you do, see how we can work, better together, share information, anything of that nature. Just probably give us a heads up if you can. But yeah, so, and I believe it was September, maybe one of you two, if I get this wrong, September 1st, 1993 was when we moved into that office. Before that, we were physically at the airport. So when they built the radar, it was completed a little bit before that, and then our building officially moved into September 1st, 93. And we're also, shout out to the Army Corps. We're very thankful to them because it's on their land. So I believe our rent is $1. So we're okay with that. Saves the taxpayers a little more money. In terms of the interior, like what we actually do in operations, there's always at least 2 of us on staff 24/7, 365. Christmas, New Year's Day, pick your holiday, there's always at least 2 of us there. In most cases, we can get the job done with 2, but as you can imagine, big weather moves through, severe weather events, we can surge very quickly up to 12 plus. And unfortunately, we don't have a picture of that here, but big severe weather event, we can easily have a dozen people or more to try and accomplish everything, get the warnings out, communicate out with you guys, social media, calls incoming. You can imagine organized chaos might be the right way to put it. With this to me underscores just the sheer importance of like at least some weather preparedness or understanding how you may be affected by it. It's a really busy slide, so don't worry about all the details, but the takeaways being every icon on there, basically every dot signifies what is estimated to be at least $1 billion event, and this was for calendar year 2021. And again, minimum $1 billion. So that's losses for buildings, infrastructure. In the Midwest, for Iowa specifically, we had 2, maybe 3 that affected parts of the state, largely severe weather oriented, and it's agriculture that is the big driver of losses here in the Midwest. So you can imagine like the 2020 derecho, less so the December derecho, but a lot of those cases are crop loss, especially given the times of years that time of the year they tend to come through. Again, some miscellaneous stats at the bottom. So tied with those, we had nearly 800 fatalities, obviously a bunch of injuries, and then clearly a lot of damages, at least in terms of billions of dollars. And a lot of these, even the fires, tend to be weather related, or they have responses that tie into weather and our type of operations. So again, it is a broad, interesting, I guess, look at how weather can affect us. We don't just forecast though, which a lot of people, public calls up and they think that's all we do. We're sitting there staring at models and trying to update our forecast or create the next 7-day forecast. Again, quiet weather like today, that's not the case. It doesn't actually take too long to put out a decent forecast during quiet weather. So we have other aspects that we do. A lot of it is service. Another broad topic is science, and that'll be on the next one. But again, another busy slide, but the takeaway point here is it ranges from going out and doing storm surveys. The top right one there, we're doing an interview out of the storm survey. Chad Hahn is pictured in the right center there again, doing like national interviews with like the Weather Channel or similar. Top left, we have EMs and other partners come out and we discuss various topics. It can be very specific to like flooding within certain watersheds within a metro area, or it can be very broad, involving counties or multiple counties and preparedness plans. A little more recently in Weather Service history, we do a lot of on-site, what we call decision support services. And Iowa State's depicted there in the bottom left. So that's actually a really interesting one. And we do have a couple of cases where a meteorologist was up there during active weather, let's put it that way. And they helped drive the decision to basically pause the game. And then in the specific event, I lose the date in my mind. But more importantly, he also helped determine when the all clear was, because they have, NCAA has certain set guidelines, but he was able to help them determine if those guidelines were enough in this specific instance. And then of course our operations, we just had a big partner meeting, losing track of days, was that 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago? So recently, and it was the first time coming out of COVID that we were able to have a significant number of people to the office. In this case is emergency managers across the state. And again, part of it is just getting face-to-face again, because it's one thing, I'm sure we're all tired of telework to some degree. It's nice to be able to look people in the face, shake their hands, and actually have conversations that aren't across video screens or your computer screens. So that was fantastic from our point of view. I think we had, including our staff, over 50 people there. And I know it spurned a number of conversations that we're going to follow up on things we can do to try and help not only ourselves, but those EMs. Oh, there we go. Going too fast. There we go. And then, wait, never mind. I forgot there was a slide inserted here. Polk County, we're here at Polk County, right? So we had to put them front and center in this image. So this is just some of the partners that we work with. And the point of this one is to drive home that, yes, we're a federal agency, but we're not the kind of federal agency that just strictly works with federal partners. By and large, the people we work with is local. So again, any county emergency manager, you see a lot of media on there. You see Homeland Security. You see Iowa Flood Center out of Iowa City, the University of Iowa there. It just goes on and on. So anyone that has any exposure to weather really is a potential partner. Another one that's not listed here is we work a lot with school districts now. And actually with football season still underway, we do support for them starting Friday afternoons, updating weather in a chat room, and we can communicate with them that way. So just as another example of a local partner we can work with. So again, it's not just state level government or local government, it also blossoms out into the public at large. I don't want to go too quick. There we go. And then the science side, of course, we are a science-based agency, so we have to do a lot of things regarding the science. Computers aid us in a lot of aspects of the forecast nowadays. But that being said, everything that goes into those computer updates or the model updates have to be researched somehow, right? So a lot of times we work with not only within the Weather Service itself to do various research projects, but we'll work with universities. And we're very blessed to have Iowa State with a meteorology program very close to us. So we have a really good relationship with them. So tied to that, going to conferences, presenting said research. Again, that's another aspect too of like building the relationship. You present the research, but if you can talk to the people firsthand, you can get a lot of things, actually, in my opinion, a lot of things done comparatively to teleworking or doing it through computer screens. But again, of course, the science also involves a lot of training because it evolves very quickly. I think Brooke and Chad can attest to this, that our training loads so we go into spring, we call it our convective season, the storm season, and then winter is our snow season. Those are two main training seasons, and typically speaking, oh gosh, it's probably upwards of 48 to 60 plus hours of training, with just some of its updates and some of its new things. So we're always trying to better ourselves through various means. I think with that, I'm going to transition over to Chad. We'll talk a little bit more, I think, like the warning system in general.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm going to transition here and talk a little bit about how we interact with our partners and our from the media aspect and also our emergency management folks at the end of the day to reach the greatest number of people, right? And this schematic gives kind of a good idea of what the process goes into reaching the public. It's pretty darn complicated. If you rewind back your mind to 2000, just 20 years ago, and I know I can definitely think back and reflect on those times and think of the ways that we have the various communication growth in recent years. We all have cell phones in our pockets, walking transponders that we didn't have back then, right? So there's a lot of advancements that we've seen both on the technology front, a lot of research done in the science front, but there's also a big lift on the dissemination front. And we'll talk about some of those, but these are the three key partners that we utilize and we rely on, frankly, to ensure that we have an effective warning system. We have that little office up in Johnston that Alan showed, right, up on the west side of Saylorville. There's a lot of bricks that make up that office. There's very few windows, and they're like this big, which seems kind of inappropriate because we all got into weather because we really liked weather and outside and sky and to see the storms and the different weather events roll in. We can't do it without the partnerships that we have. And everybody from the county emergency management folks, we serve 51 counties in the state of Iowa. So I don't know if your eyes are good enough that you can see up to Esterville right now, because ours isn't, right? So we have to rely on all of these local entities to ensure that we get an input into the communities that we serve, right? And Alan mentioned it that we're federally funded and but we're a local resource, and we really are. And we kind of view that, approach our work in that fashion because we need to be able to get boots on the ground into those communities. Not to be left out is our media partners. As you all know, they have an extraordinarily large megaphone that they can reach the majority of folks in a very quick fashion. Social media, the cell phone alerting, there's a lot of different ways that we can do that and we can rely upon it. At the end of the day, it boils down to one thing, and it's relationships. Without the relationships, that means the messaging isn't consistent, which means that people are less likely to take the appropriate actions, right, in the event of severe weather. So the overarching perspective on the warning system goal is to maximize the number of people who take the appropriate action to minimize the property damage and the loss of life due to weather, flooding, and other natural man-made disasters. Seems simple enough, right? Right? If we can be good at being at the warning system, that means people are going to take good actions and keep themselves and their families safe. But yet we continue to have these big disaster events where people are killed and there's significant damage to property. So our work really isn't done. Looking back historically, you look back in the late 1800s, there was a big flood in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, killed 2,200 people, thereabouts, 2,000 plus people. And we see that whether it's the Joplin tornado of 2011, the Tuscaloosa and the Alabama tornado outbreak, we are seeing these significant events continue, and we need to make sure that the warning system goal is as effective as it can be. I mentioned earlier about 2000 and the different ways that we had to receive weather information. TV, radio, outdoor warning sirens. Those are the three methods that would have existed back just 20 years ago. TV is the emergency alert system that's in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, but look at all the additional ones that we've had added since then. We have social media, Twitter, Facebook, Alert Iowa, which Polk County has just come onto in recent months. And that's available across for majority of counties across the state. We have the wireless emergency alerts on our cell phones will be activated for any and all tornado warnings and post the derecho of 2020 for the most significant of severe thunderstorm warnings. Okay. We didn't have that capability back for that derecho to be able to activate cell phones. We do today. Again, growth, advancements into what we do. In the lower left-hand corner, we work closely with our DOT partners to activate signage on the roadways because you're not supposed to be looking at your cell phones, right, as you're driving down the highway. It's grown dramatically, and it's important to kind of know it's a complicated process in order to get the warnings out to everybody so they can take the appropriate action. So here's a little bit about the observation networks that we use in the forecast realm. Again, comparing it to how we used to do it in the past. 150 years ago, there would have been, I don't know, maybe 30 observation sites across the country. And with the inception of this little thing called the telegraph, we were then able to communicate what those observations were, plot them on the map at the same time, to see what was going on upstream. Okay, really the early stages of what forecasting would become over the course of the next century. And so today, our observation networks range from our ground-based and radar networks, which we have a few examples there. The upper left is automated observing sites that we have at area airports across the country. The radar, which if you drive up along Beaver Drive, you would see our radar, which is our prime tool that we use for warnings. Inside the radar is on the little right-hand side there. You can barely see it, but there's this big parabolic dish that basically takes up the entire size of that radar. The outer golf ball is just a shell for protection. My 3-year-old, we call it the weather ball. So every time he sees it, he's like, there's the weather ball. So that's a fun inside thing that we get to do. Lower left is the river gauges and the river stages that we see. We don't see flooding here in Polk County, do we? Yeah, we do, right? 2018, we don't have to reflect back. We've had a few events this year, right around the state fair, where we see significant precipitation events. It's absolutely important that we know how much flow is going through our rivers so we can predict and build up protection to prevent significant property damage and property loss. The upper air we analyze very frequently. This is kind of a fun little video here from our folks over in the Davenport office of a high wind upper air balloon release. It's the most frightening thing to go out and have to do an upper air release on these days, I know from experience, because if that balloon hits the ground, it pops and you got to do it all over again. And he's pretty excited, right? in order to get it off the ground. He's like, yeah, I don't have to do it again. So that tool, that instrument that he had on that balloon will basically record temperature, moisture, pressure, and wind speed. It's all GPS. And it goes up to about 100,000 feet. By the time it gets there, it's about the size of a small house because pressure decreases with height, right? Ears pop when you go up in the airplane. And so that balloon will expand to about a small house. It'll pop and it'll float back down to the ground. Fun fact is we get about 20 to 30% of those back returned to us that we use again for another release later on because they're attached with the parachute and they float down to the surface. So the little graphic schematic on the bottom side of that shows the type of data that we receive and the graphs that we use in order to make decisions when it comes to forecasting. It's a three-dimensional perspective of what's going on upstairs in the atmosphere. And that is really critical. We can't make forecasts just by what's occurring here on the ground. We need to know where the jet stream's at. We need to know where the upper level systems are at. And much of that is given to us by our upper air network. And then finally on this slide, the satellite pictures on the right-hand side. We have satellites that are orbiting the Earth regularly. And then we also have satellites that are stationary above the Earth that are taking pictures. We've had new ones that we've released within the last couple of years that essentially are like a big fancy digital camera taking snapshots upstairs. And then we can put it together to loop it to see the way the storms are moving to and from, along with a whole slew of other information that we can get from that satellite, those satellites. So a really neat technology that's, again, grown significantly in the last 50 years. I used to work with one of my coworkers at a former office, and he used to work military in Alaska. And he said, when they first came out with the satellite, which was probably 1970-ish, they would get 2 snapshots a day, the military, and they were literally in a briefcase, and it was handcuffed to his arm as he had to transport this across base. And now today we can actually increase the frequency to get a picture every minute fed to our workstations all across the country, including here in Johnston. So kind of cool, kind of a neat little side note of how the technology has grown. So forecast history, Alan did a great job kind of talking about how this has evolved, just like a lot of other careers. This has really grown dramatically from all the technology advancements that we've seen. The upper left image, you can't see it real great, but that was the very first weather map back in 1871. That was collected. Again, telegraph enabled that. You can see there, you look at the country, just the lack of observation sites, which would make sense back then. And now we have multiple sites even within the Des Moines metro area that's feeding us information. All that is improving our ability to produce a higher level of forecasts. And then down below, we've got a hand analysis and a lower left-hand map. We've got some of our early computer systems that we use to both forecast the weather and issue warnings. But today, things are, again, continues to grow in complexity, and the data that we use in order to make a good forecast. Look there in the lower left-hand corner is in front of a workstation that can view all of the data that we show on the other images on this slide in order to make that forecast as accurate as can be. And I know it's easy to probably sit here, right? You guys have all said this. I want to be a weatherman, because it's the only job I can have and be wrong half the time and still draw a paycheck. I know you guys have said this, or you said it to a buddy at a party, right? But I can stand here today and can tell you within the last 20 years, the 5-day forecast in 2000 is as accurate as the 3-day forecast today. Because of the technology that we have, the computing power that we've been adding, in order to enable us to get those better forecasts. The lower right-hand image there is interesting too. Back when I started in the agency, which is now about 20 years ago, we would have about 5 forecast models that we could look at. And forecast models, you may hear the TV guys, folks, the TV meteorologists speak about those. They're just computer simulations. Okay. Anybody play March Madness in your brackets? Nobody does. I got some few shaking heads. Predicting the future is kind of hard, isn't it? I stink at those brackets, right? But the advancements in modeling today, we have over 200 different computer models that we can use. And frankly, it's become a little data overload at times with the models that are available. The lower right-hand graphic basically shows all variances of simulations of what the computer thinks could happen in this particular event. In this case, it's snow. I hope that's not a precursor of when our first snow would come, November 16th, but it's possible. But you can see it could range from 1 inch up to 7 inches, depending on how the system evolves. So although you may hear a forecast of you're going to get 3.7 inches of snow at your house, we're not that good, right? There's a chance you might get 0, and there's a chance you might get 8, depending on how things evolve. The computers really give us a good idea on what those are. So today, I think this is my last slide, but I wanted to put this up there. This is actually very new. So the latest in supercomputing technology today was released just earlier this summer. And for those that aren't aware, there's a little bit of a, every country has their own computer model, their computer projection that they're investing money into. Many of them across the world. And so just like they are, we're investing in the computing speed and the technology as well. And this one was released earlier this year, and it's going to enable an upgrade to our US global forecast system this fall, so now, and launch the new hurricane forecast called Hurricane Analysis and Forecast System, slated to be operational next year, 2023. These twin supercomputers called Dogwood and Cactus are both serve as primary and backup. So if one goes down, the other one can kick in. They operate at speeds of 12 petaflops. I don't know what a petaflop is. You guys? It's really fast, right? It's supposed to be really fast. 12 petaflops. It's 3 times faster than what our current system is, the previous system was. And it makes our predictive speed now at 42 petaflops when you combine some of the other supercomputers that we have in our country, making these two supercomputers currently ranked 49th and 50th of the fastest in the world. That's crazy to think that the supercomputing speed is within the top 50 when it comes to predicting weather. I think that's neat stuff, and it's going to only improve and increase as we go forward in time in our ability to be able to make those accurate forecasts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Brooke, and she can talk a little bit about additional stuff.
So great, we've got all of this forecast information. There's a lot of data that goes into it. We're working all the time 24/7 at the office, but what does that mean for you all? How are you going to use it? How are you going to get that information? So first, we've got to hit watches, warnings, advisories, outlooks, because almost every time we have an event, there's some confusion about what's a watch and what's a warning. So if you remember nothing else from today, it's remembering what these things are, because it can be a little weird with the naming conventions. So it kind of goes from time out from the event and also intensity of the event. So the most number of days or hours ahead of the event, you'll have the outlooks. It's just saying, hey, there's a possibility that something could get a little crazy in a few days. You're going to want to pay attention. As we move up, we get to the advisory. All right, there's something happening. It's time to take action. It's not going to be life-threatening, but you're probably going to want to pay attention to it. As we get to a watch, this is kind of our precursor to the warnings. They go hand in hand. It's not happening yet, but when it does, it's going to be bad. So not only take action, but take major action and do it now. The warning is, hey, it's happening now. Your preparedness time is little to none, so it's go time. If you haven't done anything yet, now is the time, because it's on us now. So that's kind of the ranking on how we go from advisories through to watches and warnings. All right, great. How can I get this information? We have a webpage that you're welcome to go to, weather.gov/Des Moines. There's a lot going on our webpage. At the top, we've got news headlines that you can click on. It goes anything from our latest newsletter that we send out monthly to links to climate data or event summary. So if we have a big event such as the March 5th event, we'll do a full summary of the event that is everything from storm reports to radar imagery and satellite and things like that. And we'll create a web page and link it at the top. You can also get our what we call our point and click forecast. So if you click anywhere on that map that's outlined, it will take you to a 7-day forecast for the specific point that you clicked on. Something that's really cool with that is that whenever we do our forecast grids at the office, they're about 1.5 miles by 1.5 miles grid points in our system. When you click on that map, it pulls that exact grid point from our database and extracts that exact information. So we don't like go in and write up, this is the forecast for Des Moines and this is the forecast for Fort Dodge. It basically creates the text like wording based off of the forecast data we have in our database for that pixel, which is really cool. So it gets pretty specific in there. We also have some kind of higher level graphics that do summaries that we post on social media, but also will show up on our website. And of course, radar image unavailable. We do have radar that's available on our website most of the time. However, when this screenshot was taken yesterday afternoon, the radar website was down. Our radar was working, the website was not, which is unfortunate, but most of the time that's available there. And of course, there are other options to find radar as well. Our radar data is of course available on lots of apps and things like that. So there are ways that you can get that. Speaking of apps, the Weather Service is not allowed to have an app, but we do have a mobile web page, which is basically our website, but in a more mobile friendly version. It can work like an app. If you use the method where you click at the bottom of your phone and it says save web page to home screen, and then it looks just like an app on your phone, which is pretty cool. So it gives you, again, the 7-day forecast, any active watches or warnings that are currently in effect, their current conditions, and all of that's pretty useful too. All right, cool. So we've got web pages. What else have we got? Social media. This is a great way to engage, especially with the public, but also sharing each other's information. So we know a lot of public agencies are active on their social media. This is a great way for us to retweet your information and maybe for you to retweet and share ours so that we can broadcast our message to a larger audience, because we each have groups of followers that are looking at what we've got, but if we're amplifying each other's message, we're hitting a larger cross section of the people that are out there on social media. And when weather's active, of course, it's really easy to spit out information constantly with radar updates and watches and warnings and things that go out. But there's also times whenever you can hit on the weather information when it's not tornadoes on the ground. So sharing information such as changing the season. So we have a Twitter graphic up there that shows how do we know when it's going from summer to fall, and what does that mean with the sun and the earth rotating around, and how does that look? Using it as a bit of an education platform, or sharing records. Did we hit a record high temperature or low temperature? What's the weekend outlook? Or preparedness information. You know, the weather's quiet now, so let's make a game plan for whenever the weather's not quiet, and things like that. So we like to make sure that we're constantly spitting out information there on social media as well. Then as we get into kind of our higher impact events, we start to ramp up the messaging. So it's not the cutesy graphics on social media anymore, it's game time now. So as we get closer to an event and we know it's going to be high impact, we start increasing our messaging in the form of briefings and webinars. Those will start out as emailed packets that will go out in the form of a PDF usually. Those are emailed out and also posted on our website. And if there's one that's active right now, there will be a big yellow rectangle on our webpage that you can click on and get the PDF. But we do also email these out as well. And this goes for convective events or for winter weather events. So you can start making your plans in advance. There are some times where, okay, weather happens, you make a snap decision and it's easy to react. There are other things that take a lot more planning, and you need to know days, hours in advance that something's gonna go on so that you can put your plans into place. So we try to make sure that the information gets out to you all as early as possible so that you can start making decisions. So these are a couple examples from some pretty recent events, last year's New Year's storm, or the March 5th convective event there as well. If the event is expected to be one of the really, really high impact ones, we will do it as a webinar so that we can ask and answer any live questions that you all have that are very specific to your areas. So we try to make sure that we're meeting that need as well. All right, that's great. What if I need help right now with something? We do have NWS Chat, which is really cool chat software that we're able to use to communicate directly with partners, but also pick up the phone and call us. We're always happy to answer questions there as well. We make sure that whenever we're doing this, we're communicating across all of our partner groups, making sure that we're sending out the same message that is consistent, because if the public is getting a message and they hear one thing on TV, one thing from us, and then a different alert comes across on their phone, they're not going to take action because they don't know which one to trust. So making sure that we're all communicating with each other and sending out consistent messaging is really important. That means us, media, academia, public partners, all staying on the same page. Now, Alan hinted on this briefly. We will do on-site support for those high-end events, whether it's expected to impact or maybe not. So outdoor events can be really vulnerable because there's usually a lot of people in a small place, and there's usually not enough sheltering if something were to go wrong, which means they're very vulnerable and need more lead time if something is expected to occur there. So we will deploy actually on site. So a couple examples that we have up here, Hinterland Music Festival, the Iowa Speedway, as a couple examples just from the summer, as well as Iowa State. These are really important in building relationships amongst partners and building trust, whether we've got thunderstorms going on or not. I don't know if you all can see that handheld device. That's actually my hand there. This is Hinterland. It was very hot. And so heat was a really big problem. And often if it's not thunderstorms where you need to shelter people, you're not thinking about the weather as much, but heat can be really, really dangerous. The device I have in my hand there takes into account whether you're in the shade or not. This is in the shade backstage. You can kind of see the crowd there in the background. In the shade, it was 108 degrees with the heat index. We did a heat mapping study. It was really cool. We drove around kind of through the campgrounds and things there. Some of the campgrounds that were fully exposed sunlight, and then there's kind of this marshy pond area, extra humidity, the heat index with all the extra humidity, and then the blazing sun right with no shade was like 131, really hot. So that's something you're going to want to know if you've got an outdoor event and you've got people that are camping, which means they're not able to access any cooling shelters. Really important to know that. So those are really cool events for us to be able to work and build those partnerships to keep people safe. We've also got some specialty products. So, all right, sometimes you know an event, it's planned, you know it's going to happen, and you can start putting plans into place as far as, okay, if there's a thunderstorm, or if it's hot, or if there's snow, this is what I'm going to do. Other things are not planned for. You have that fire or that hazmat incident, and you need weather information now because you didn't know it was going to happen. We can run this plume dispersion model. It's a high split, and basically determine kind of what that plume is going to look like as far as what our evacuation is going to look like. Which way is this plume going to go? Who's going to be in danger if this is going to last for a couple hours, maybe a couple days, hopefully not, and what that looks like is there as well there. So it's not just when the weather is active and you're coming to us for information. We can push stuff out to you if something happens. You're like, hey, the weather's quiet, but it's kind of windy out and I've got this incident. Can you help me out? Yes, we can. So feel free to anytime, day or night. Like Alan said, we're here 24/7, 365. So if you've got something going on at 3 a.m., give us a call. And we're happy to help you out with that. We want to make sure that the services that we can provide are getting out to you all so that you're not having to kind of wing it and think that you're doing it alone. We're definitely here to help you out. So that's all I've got. We can take some questions, chat as well. We've got our contact information up there if you think of something later. Otherwise, thank you for taking time out of your day.
I have a question, Chad. You were talking about modeling and I think maybe just for the hurricanes, but what's the difference between the US modeling and the European model? And do we worry about that here?
So the differences between the two, well, they're built obviously with probably different infrastructure underneath of it as far as the, some of the equations are going to be similar that we use and they use. So, but we have access to their modeling too. And that's one of the ones that we use as we are able to use it for the forecast. There's actually a WMO, it's called World Meteorological Organization, that every country is able to share their data. They use ours as well. The reason that there isn't just one model is that they're all wrong to some degree, right? So they're investing similarly just as we are. It's the structure of the European models a little bit different. That organization, of course, is a little bit different than how it's organized in the National Weather Service. But in large, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Just the way that they approach and tweak and adjust and modify the code that kind of simulates the forecast for us is probably what's different between the two.
It's just another tool in your toolbox.
It's another tool in the toolbox that's relied on heavily, frankly, by us, both in the Weather Service, as just like our US model is as well. The Canadians have a model. There's just so many that are out there that frankly, it's difficult to sometimes be able to filter through and see which one is going to be better with just the sheer number that we have access to today.
Storm spotters.
Storm spotters, yes.
How can somebody be one? How are they helpful to what you do?
Sure. I mean, storm spotters can become one by going to our storm spotter training. That's usually in late winter, February, March timeframe. How are they useful? Chad mentioned before, we've got these little tiny windows in our office. We can't see everything that's going on. And as we're making warning decisions, especially during convective, it's the most important, I would say, kind of getting that ground truth, because you can see something that's coming across on radar. Okay, based off of this radar imagery, I think that it's producing golf ball sized hail. And so I issue a warning for that. And then we get no reports, and it's like, well, maybe it's not producing golf ball sized hail. There are interesting instances where the radar could fool us into thinking that it's something else. Maybe it's wet hail that looks more reflective, and so it's small hail, but it's wet, and so the radar thinks it's bigger, or dry hail. Weird things can happen. And so if we're not getting reports, it's easy for us to second guess ourselves. Maybe we'll be slower to issue downstream, or maybe we won't issue downstream at all. But the more reports we get, the more we can understand, okay, this is exactly what's going on in the storm. And our update time is going to be faster. And the accuracy within the warning is going to be better because we know what the storm is capable of. We can also use it to calibrate. So if we get a different storm and we say, okay, this signal is just like this storm over in Western Iowa, so I'm going to issue the same kind of warning because I know that this storm did the exact same thing. It helps get us that ground truth and kind of calibrate, okay, this is how today's going to go because I have reports on this other storm. So we use that to kind of set our baseline for the day. If we're getting reports. So it increases our confidence and makes us more reactive as we get future storms start to develop.
And it's, I think just to add on to what Brooke said, the urgency is is communicated better with the media partners, because instead of the tornado warning that's radar indicated, the tornado warning is observed, and we communicate that in our warning text. And so the amplifiers of the warning message, primarily media, can get that information, and they can now say, no, it's not. Now it's observed. It's on the ground, and that takes a different and communicates a different level of urgency to the public. Right? People are going to be like, radar indicated. I've gotten a lot of those over the years, and none of them have hit me. Well, if it's observed and now it's coming, it's the same tornado warning that you have observed in the text of the warning. It can be another layer of urgency for the action.
My name is Shay and I work for the city of Des Moines in the city manager's office and handle most of the street use permitting. So any event that wants to use a street in the city of Des Moines has to apply and receive a special permit. I think obviously you guys have been very involved in some larger scale events, Ironman. You shared some of the other outdoor events that you all have been instrumental in participating in. Is there a resource that I or someone from our team could provide these event organizers that may be on a smaller scale, but that could still probably benefit from being in tune to the weather? Because if I'm issuing them a street use permit, obviously their event is happening outside.
Right.
I'd like to think that they're paying attention, but I just wonder if there's an opportunity for us to create a partnership or provide them some sort of resource so that they can be in tune to what is happening around them. They've got a lot of things to think about, but obviously I think weather would be a very important one.
Right. So there's a lot to unpack kind of in your question.
Yeah.
Great question, by the
Sorry,
way.
it's a little bit
No, it was
layered.
good. It was perfect because it's stuff that we didn't cover. So we are, as a governmental agency, we are a resource to our governmental partners. So Deanne, Cameron, AJ, Dutch, and crew here at EMA, they are the gatekeeper in a large degree. So Ironman, for example, Deanne reached out last year and said, hey, we'd like to have you down here because it's this 30-mile race. And obviously people are really susceptible to weather. So that's kind of the gatekeeper of kind of pulling us into the mold to private. So if, for example, if the example that you had, it's a private event that's gotten approval to shut down these 2 blocks of street, they could come to us and always reach out to us and can ask questions. But for us to be on site or do anything proactive with a private organizer would be prohibited because there's a billions and billions of dollars in the private sector in the weather industry that can do and step in and provide that enhanced level of service for a private event like that. So I think to your kind of onto your question, there is, and we can swap cards, I think afterwards, but there is some information that we could share from a passive situational awareness perspective that would be useful. And maybe to send the message that they can call us whenever they want and we will always be there to answer those questions. But to be kind of the point where I started, to be on site and to be proactive and active in that, emergency management or another safety official needs to be the incident commander in order for us to plug in that fashion.
I mean, I just even think like IMT Des Moines Marathon, that's 26 miles. I mean, it's not as big as Ironman, but you know, there are some pretty large scale events happening in the city.
Right.
And sometimes they involve me, but not always.
Yeah.
I
So
just was just trying to create some
yep, that's good. It's
opportunity.
the biggest thing would be, even if emergency management's not involved, they would maybe be the conduit for an incident commander that is in charge from the safety official group. So it could be a fire chief, it could be a however that's organized. So long as that exists as that group.
We work, I mean, our street use team is made up of public safety, obviously my sweet friends over here from the fire department. And then we also have police presence on that committee as well. So I'm certain that they're in tune. But I just think I need to get the event organizers to think independently too, to be paying attention.
And it gets
Just
busy.
because the city probably is going to be the one that gets the complaint. Well, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's
Yeah.
really your responsibility. But in that, here's what you need to look at to get your information.
So the QR code, right, takes you right to the Des Moines page. Would that be something to make available and post around your
Well, and I
event?
even thought making sure that they're aware about Alert Iowa, because I think there is some opportunity with that as well. So,
Absolutely. Yep.
and I have a little bit of weather background, and so I always want to make sure that people are paying attention when they should.
Well, and when weather gets busy, right, so too does their normal jobs, right?
Right.
I would
Yep.
imagine if I was an incident commander, things start to ramp up, I start to see lightning coming in. I'm probably starting to be busy in the normal stuff that I'm supposed to do.
Correct.
And being pulled away from the situational awareness. I think that's kind of the value of the Ironman and some of the bigger events we've had is that when that happens, bless you.
Thank you.
If and when that happens and weather, hazardous weather threatens, they have somebody that they know that's going to be manning that area of situational awareness and can provide that in real time. So, and we know there's a lot of events going on. We have Micron here in Des Moines, and we rely heavily on that. We know when there's events, arts and crafts festivals and the various events that we see across the city. And we do proactively send out information knowing that there's some bigger vulnerabilities there that reach a large group. But yeah, we're happy to plug in however appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I even think, the partnership hosts a farmer's market 28 Saturdays out of the year that brings thousands of people
Yep.
into an outdoor space.
Absolutely.
There's just some.
Yep.
One more element they need to think of in their event plan.
Well, and we've seen them over and over again, right? From the, really began our agency's efforts into this was the Indiana State Fair collapse, stage collapse back in 2011, I think it was 2011, somewhere around there. Of just how important it is to know and have some of that expertise, because in that instance, the gust front was preceded what the radar would have shown. The winds were out ahead of it by about 10 minutes, and that's what impacted. So unless you were looking at a particular radar variable and you weren't looking at just the red colors, right, that we're used to looking at on radar, you wouldn't have known that was going to impact quicker. So, yeah. Question.
Any other questions? Well, thanks, you guys, our favorite partners of all, for coming here today and presenting. And thank you all for taking time today to come here as well. Appreciate you filling out your evaluations. Again, if you have any other topic suggestions, we'd love to hear them. And be safe out there. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Good fire.